up, family? Welcome to Living For You, the YouTube channel. It is your favorite cousin, your favorite brother, your favorite uncle, your best friend's best friend, Dr. Larry, me. How you doing? Welcome to the channel. This is a safe space, a positive place, a place where we go and we not only grow as individuals in ourselves, all of us, but we also grow with each other, but we also have fun, and it's entertaining and it's engaging and it's all of that great stuff. So go ahead, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. The more we grow, the more we can do, and the more we can expand this positivity and this fun, excitement, and growth around the world. And go ahead and like the videos. Do all that stuff. And because that means that you're participating, and this is a participatory situation. It's a democracy, it's not a dictatorship, so we're all here to share and engage with one another. Leave comments, like the videos, share the videos, engage me, I'll engage you. Let's have us a good time. For those of you, once again, who are new, I am Dr. Larry Smith. I'm a certified life and spiritual coach. And actually what you're in for today is Married to Medicine. This episode this week. It's episode 6, I want to say, but I'm not sure. It might be episode 5. But I'll have it, of course, on the thumbnail and in the description correctly. But anyway, we're talking about the episode, but I'm doing it, of course, from a life coaching perspective, or a life coach's perspective, kind of give my little tidbits on certain different things. So no, this is not a review technically of the show, but what it actually is just me giving my perspective on different things about the show. There's many other great YouTubers out there that you can go and you can subscribe to their channels and get great rundowns, some comical, some fun, some in-depth of the show. So anyway, welcome to the channel. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and get started because we got so much to cover. This episode was so full and so rich. The one thing that I saw that was a common thread throughout the entire episode was kind of this parental-child relationship. So we actually begin the episode with Simone and her son Michael going and buy him stuff for his dorm in college. It's so interesting because, like I told you guys in the last videos, I've been watching this show since the very inception of it. And he was a little boy when this show started, I think 8 years ago at this point. And so he's growing up into a man. He's becoming a young man going into college, and he's older now. And one of the things that I love about Simone's storyline with her, even when her and her husband had issues, Simone has always had a great relationship, and so does Cecil, with their children. I love it to see parents, especially black parents, be able to have open and candid communication with their children and be able to discuss things and have fun with one another, but also have serious conversations about growing up and being a mature, responsible adult. And I see that Simone and Cecil do have that type of relationship with their children. They are parents, but at the end of the day, they want their children to trust that they can just come to them and communicate with them. And I love to see that. Not all of us had that luxury. Sometimes we were taught, as you guys may have been, that a child stays in a child's place, and we kind of get this fear, it's maybe even reverence, I don't know what you want to call it, of our parents, that sometimes we didn't always feel comfortable coming to them with our true heart's desires and thoughts and feelings and everything. So I love to see that relationship between Simone and her kids and Cecil and their kids, and how they're growing and developing into young men. And I think it's going to be healthy. They're going to make somebody's wife or husband happy with the way they're developing their kids. Then we transition, and I have my notes, so if you see me grab something, that's because I'm grabbing my notes. I want to make sure that I'm getting the points out. The very next scene is actually Amina and her family, her mom, her husband, and her father going to look at Amina's new house that she's constructing. Remember, she was constructing a house in Toya's neighborhood. And Amina, I'm going to go ahead and be honest, she acts a lot like Toya, and we had already said they both were Aries, they share the same birthday, but she is that kind of materialistic mindset, just like I get out of Toya, that things matter, shiny things matter to them a lot more than some other more important things, I think, but that's just my opinion from my perspective. May not even be that in real life, I guess, even though this is supposed to be reality TV. But I see Amina likes things, and so they're building this grand house, and they're taking their parents, and their parents are very interesting. And I've said this in the very first video about this season. Amina's mom is very outspoken. She says exactly how she says it. She even says in this episode, I'm an outspoken girl, I say how I feel, and I'm going to express how I feel, the good, bad, I'm just going to say it. Now, that's problematic for me, and clearly it is problematic for Amina and her husband. She actually made Amina cry when Amina went to speak to her father and tried to explain, why does she always have to have an opinion? This is something I love, this is something I'm doing for me, and she's just tearing it down and being very critical of it, and it's hard for her. And so her dad reminds her that, you know, you're going to have to take care of her. We're not going to always be here. One of us is going to move on, die at some point, and so you're going to be the child that's going to take in that parent and take care of that parent, and chances are it might be the mom. And so you got to just kind of get used to it. And it was part of their culture. You know, in Indian culture, I've seen this, and it's in a lot of Eastern cultures, but it also happens in Africa as well. So I guess a lot of cultures that are rooted in tradition and long-standing histories, they tend to have the family there. Family plays a big role, and generations after generations of family live in the same house. And it's just a way of being. But when I look at Amina's mom, I'm like, she is very difficult to deal with. She's extremely opinionated. She's telling them what they should do in their house, how the rooms for the guests should be bigger because they want a bigger room with a balcony. And it's just, be quite frank, it's annoying. But Amina, respecting her culture, respecting her parents, respecting her mom, she's trying not to be rude and say, hey mom, chill out. But her husband is a little irritated with it. And it's causing a situation that you can see between Amina and her husband, the doctor, who feels like her mom shouldn't have so much of a say-so in their experience. And Amina's like, pretty much stop disrespecting my mom, that's my mom. Here's two things. One, I will say, there has to be some boundaries drawn in that relationship. I understand that Amina's an old, she's not a young girl anymore. She's old enough now to really have had already said this to her mom and her parents. But boundaries need to be set, that my marriage comes before this. My marriage comes before my parental-child relationships at this point, because I'm trying to create something for my kids in a positive way. And I can't do that unless I set those boundaries. So she needs to set the boundaries between her mom and her family, and her mom's opinion and all that stuff having such a heavy toll on her life. Those boundaries need to be set, because if she doesn't, she will lose her husband. He's going to get fed up with the situation, and her mom's going to ruin her relationship. So there has to be that boundary set. And then she also has to be able to, her husband has to be understanding, of course, but she also has to be understanding that him, as the provider of his house, don't want somebody from the outside of their house who's not part of the immediate family to come and tell them what they should and should not do in their respective space. So it's very important that Amina sets that boundary with her mom, or else it's going to grow into a bigger problem in the future. I can just totally see that happening. Then we go to Dr. Jackie dealing with her patient. Not going to go much in that. They talk about a lot of women's things. So I'm not going to go much in that. We'd love to see the doctors at work. This is one of the things I love about the show, is that we get a chance to see Black professionals doing professional things and doing their job. So they have to throw it in. The show's called Married to Medicine, so it is what it is. Eugene and Toya Toya decides to run a bath for her and Eugene to have a little daytime romance, as Eugene called it. And you can clearly see that Toya and Eugene are trying to work on their marriage being more healthy. Because we've seen it, it's played out season after season after season, that sometimes Toya uses Eugene as her whipping boy. And he said that it's a form of abuse. And it actually is. Verbal abuse is just as much of tough abuse on some people as physical abuse. Abuse is abuse across the board. And so, yes, it has been a problematic thing, and especially this season, Toya's been extra snappy. So Eugene calls her out on that and tells her she needs to get that together, because he doesn't want to always be defensive. And we know the situation where one might be aggressive, the other might be defensive, and they always clashing back and forth instead of actually really solving issues. And to be in full transparency disclosure, I've been in that situation. I know what that feels like, and I've been the verbal abuser. Because one thing I know about myself is I'm a pretty good communicator. I hope so. I hope you guys agree. But what happens is when I get really, really frustrated and really, really irritated, and this is, of course, something I work through daily because I'm not perfect, but I tend to lash out verbally, and I can get a little verbal abusive, and so I have to constantly work on myself from not trying to do that. See, that's me being transparent, full disclosure. Yes, I'm a life coach. Yes, I'm an educated person, but it does not mean I'm perfect. I'm growing, I'm learning, and we're doing this together. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. So anyway, so I kind of can get the situation that Toya and Eugene are in. But I'm happy to see that they are working through their marriage, that he doesn't want to be that man who wives domineering him and beating him up verbally. He appreciates her strength. That's what attracted him to her. And he's a Leo. So yes, he appreciates that fire. He's attracted to that fire, but he doesn't like it lashed out at him. And that's the legitimate request. And Toya says she's going to work on it, which I think is a good thing. That they're trying to work on their marriage and trying to build something that is going to be bigger so that the kids can have a healthy environment. I think that that's a wonderful, wonderful thing that they're doing. And I love to see this kind of stuff on the show, because this is showing that yes, marriages can have problems. All of them do. Every marriage has problems. There's no such thing as the perfect marriage. It's all about problem management, problem discussion, and problem resolving, right? You don't want to consistently have the same problem for years and years and years. You need to get to the conversation, get to the root of the issue, and work your best as a couple to resolve the problem that you have, so that it don't grow into fester to become something deeper. So I appreciate seeing that. Then it goes to Dr. Heavily and her son Zachary. I think it's her oldest son. He's clearly a very bright young man. He's pre-med. He's got a real estate license. He's trying to build himself up as a solid, upstanding man. And the one thing I loved, well, two things, but one thing more so I loved about this scene was heavily discussing finances and economics and building wealth with her son. I find that to be such an important thing for Black parents, and for really any parents, but especially Black parents in this day and age, to teach their kids how to build and maintain wealth, to create generational wealth to pass down to their kids, so that we start to sustain ourselves, so that no matter what's going on in the world as far as racism and any other things that we face, economics shouldn't be an obstacle, because it is something that we can do within our hands. Even if you're a person of a certain age, if you've gone beyond 50, you still can start building up for yourself a healthy economic life. And so I appreciate her having that conversation with her son and instilling in her son that it is important to be a man who looks after his economics and who is strong economically. And he seems like he's on the right track. He's learning from his parents. They're a great example of that, and I love, love, love that. And then the conversation shifts to Black Lives Matter, and Heavily is kind of relying on him for a conversation about how she should talk to Amina. Amila made a comment that, I'm a woman of color, and because I'm a woman of color, I know what you're going through as a Black person in America, because I face discrimination again as well. And I'll touch on that towards the end a little bit, because that is an interesting dynamic that we do see. As I saw an interview with Contessa when she was on Watch What Happens Live with Heavenly, and she said that's par for the course. A lot of people want to talk about their oppression and their problems, and that's valid. It's all valid. But Heavenly gave a good example, being a dentist. It's a perfect analogy, being a dentist in this scene with her son. She said, I'm a dentist, and I know if there's one bad tooth in your mouth, you have to focus on extraction, removal, or dealing with that one tooth, and the other ones, they might be problems, but if they're not as bad as that one tooth, those can wait for a while. You need to deal with that one tooth, or else the problem can get worse. And so she was basically saying, while we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we can focus on Black Lives Matter. The only reason we're focusing on Black Lives Matter is because it's never been something that we've done in any legitimate way, in any meaningful way, because so historically, for many years, Black lives didn't matter. So now we're actually saying, Black Lives Matter, pay attention. So I thought her son's advice to her was to just give statistics. You don't have to argue with people. You don't have to get mad and start rolling your neck, even though towards the end of the episode, that's kind of what she started to do. Anyway, you give statistics and you discuss, and people can't argue numbers. People can't argue facts. They might try, but at the end of the day, the facts are black and white. Logically, you can't argue with facts. So I thought that was a good thing. Anila and Contessa decides to meet to resolve some of the issues that they had at the dinner party where her and Toya blew up, and Anila felt as though Contessa had disrespected her mother, disrespected her dinner, disrespected her family by getting up and leave. Now, it's very interesting because Contessa didn't understand. I mean, Contessa was like, I don't understand. You brought that upon yourself. I told you from the jump that me and Toya do not get along. We're oil and water. Like I said last week, they do not get along, and Contessa made that very clear. But Anila wanted to be the intermediary. She put herself in that situation, and she got burned for doing that. And Contessa was like, that's your fault. And rightly so, because Contessa made an observation that you know Toya, you don't know me. You know her side of the story, you don't know mine. You weren't there unless you watched the season, and even still with that, you didn't get the entire story by watching it on TV. So what you need to do, instead of trying to fix us, just be friends to both of us. And I guess Anila figured that out. She said, I'm not doing that no more. So she's a quick learner. That's a good thing. Being a quick learner, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and knowing what you're dealing with before you try to deal with it, not knowing what you're dealing with. But anyway, and then she said, I also feel like you kind of threatened my mom. You know, because at last episode, Anila's mom grabbed Contessa to try to hold her from leaving. And Contessa was like, look, I'm a strong woman. I can break out of this. You might want to let me go. And so Anila took that as a threat. And Contessa was like, threat? Your mama accosted me. She grabbed me. She was pushing on me. I didn't do any of that. I just told her I can go there. And so Anila didn't understand. But it was just the differences of culture. Everybody don't like to be grabbed. And Contessa said that. She said, black folks won't like to be grabbed like that. Them fighting. That's fighting us. That's aggression. Don't be aggressive towards us. Whereas in your culture, it might be, and Anila's mom is aggressive, right? In my opinion. And like I said, that might just be a cultural difference that I have, but she is quite the aggressive woman. So she had to explain to Anila that, girl, look, your mom was the aggressor. Your mom could have got hurt. But overall, Contessa apologized and said she didn't mean to disrespect the dinner, leaving, and all that stuff. She just made nice and said, you know what, it ain't worth a back and forth. But I agree with Contessa. Don't grab people. That's an aggressive move. You don't know people's mindset. So Contessa could have easily shoved her out the way and pushed her down in the heat of the moment. And the next thing you know, it would have been a lot worse than what it actually happened to be. So yeah, keep your hands to yourself, Miss Anila mom. I know that's probably Indian culture and that's how things go down there up in India. But up in here in the United States, which is where you've been for quite a while, we like our personal space, don't invade it. that's just what that is. You know, it is what it is. And then they have the parent and teacher, parents and children basketball game, which they've done that a few times. But I remember the last time when they were really young. So it was cute to see them revisit that once again. And Simone and Cecil talks about inviting Jackie and Curtis because Curtis had watched Michael, her son who's going off to college, play basketball pretty much since he was in elementary school. And so she wanted that to be the good thing to do. But Jackie didn't come. Curtis is going to come. It is what it is. And we get a little conversation between Anila and Toya, in which Toya says, I don't care if y'all friends, you and Contessa. I just wish Contessa would stop talking about me. But Anila was trying to explain to her, Contessa's not talking about you. She's saying the same thing you're saying, is that I don't care if you're friends with Toya. Just kind of don't mix the two. And so Toya doesn't listen like that. She's just kind of just into her own space and thinking as soon as if you just mention her name in a conversation, you're talking about her. And it's the ego thing, I guess. I don't know. But at the end of the day, they're saying the same thing. Contessa doesn't want to be bothered with Toya, and clearly Toya doesn't want to be bothered with Contessa. So Anila needs to, once again, step out of it and let that play out the way it's going to play out, with or without you. And then everything goes fine. They play the game. You know, the parents cheat, and it's just, you know, it's a cute little game. And then at the end, they're all sitting there, Heaven and all the women. The men go inside the house, and the women are having the conversation. And Dr. Heavenly notices Anila, how she deals with her husband and with the kids. And she's kind of telling him to take the kids and whatever, in an interesting way. Now, that might be a little cultural thing for them, because like I said last time, the mom seems to overrun the daddy. Her mom seems to be the dominant one in the relationship, and the men just kind of step back. And I don't think Anila's husband too much cares for that arrangement. And so Dr. Heavenly noticed the confusion and the kind of the irritant behavior of her husband. And she tells Anila, you need to take care of your own kids. That's your job. Your husband goes out and work. You need to take care of the kids. Very old-fashioned, but commonsensical, right? If your husband's the doctor, he works hard, he's tired, why not sometime, why not be more of the strong one at home for him to have some freedom at home? Which makes perfectly sense. But Toya thought that wasn't her place to jump in. Here you go. And Anila was like, well, I work. She's like, I'm a blogger. And it is a job. Dr. Heavenly, blogging and vlogging, they're jobs. People make money from them all the time, millions of dollars all the time. It is a thing that we do. This isn't my only job. I vlog, and I'm a college professor, and I have businesses. But at the end of the day, don't shun somebody who's a vlogger. But Heavenly did, being Heavenly, I didn't know that was a real job. And then next thing you know, it becomes this kind of conversation where Toya feels like Heavenly's bullying Anila, so she steps up for her friend, and they're going back and forth. And Heavenly brings up Toya's finances, the little secret she heard from Quad last week about Toya lying, cheating, and stealing to get her house and her pool and all her stuff, and they just going back and forth talking about money. Toya's like, I got money, I'm fine. I'm wearing a $350 tracksuit. There she go once again with stuff. I told you Toya's all about shiny things, looking good, materialistic. And Heavenly, like, she thinks $350 is a whole lot of money. We up here buying houses for $400 and some $1,000 and blah, blah, blah. And so they just going back and forth, and it becomes a real catty thing. And then the conversation switches to Anila and Heavenly, when Heavenly brings up Anila saying that because she's a woman of color, a person of color, she knows what it's like to experience what Black people have experienced in these United States of America. And first of all, let me jump one back. Toya and Heavenly have this on again, off again, weird, contentious kind of jealousy thing going on. I think really Heavenly may have something going on that Toya is a pretty girl and she seems to be well kept up together, but I think Toya feels a little intimidated from Heavenly being a doctor and somehow still managing her, at least from what we know, to be a good wife and to keep home and all of this stuff. So it's almost like they kind of have animosity towards each other because within each other, they see something both of them may want that the other one has and that they don't have. And so anyway, back to Heavenly bringing up the Black Lives Matter and her comments, Anila's comments about being a person of color. There is valid basis in that, right? The valid basis is generally if you are a person of color in the United States of America and really in anywhere in the Western world, you do face racial, ethnic, sometimes religious hostility for that difference of being a non-white person in this country, a person of color. But what I think Anila, and especially because right now we're going through the situation where in Atlanta we had a mass shooting against Korean people, and we're having an increase. I think it increased 100, and I think it was 170% increase in hate crimes against Asian. A lot of people are wondering about, we need help. We're being discriminated against. We're being prejudiced. People are prejudiced against us. We're being harassed. We're being mistreated on the basis of race. And that is a valid point, because everybody who is not a white person in this country can, and many times do throughout their lives, face racial, ethnic, religious, cultural issues. But what I think a lot of people fail to realize is all of them, if not everybody else, with the exception of Black people, have it on a here now, not time later. You're faced with it now, but you weren't facing it at another time. You're facing it now, you might not face it again later. For example, I use Asian prejudice. There have always been Asian prejudice in this country, but the most hostile moments of it was in the early part of the 20th century and the late part of the 19th century, the 1880s and 90s up until about 1930, 1940. And that was hostility. And it was on and off, but it was usually through legislation. So what happened was Asians isolated themselves and kind of, because they were treated as foreigners, as immigrants, and not being treated as citizens. Because they mostly came from overseas. Even though they had helped build the Transcontinental Railroad and they had built so much of this country, they were treated as outsiders and had faced racist discrimination, especially as people from the East started migrating towards the West, and there was competition over land, resources, jobs, and all those other things amongst people of color, Asians, Blacks, and natives, and whites. And generally, whites won that conversation in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. And so, but what happened was that hostility stopped. It stopped, and Asians were doing very well. Whatever they were doing, they were doing so well that people outside of their community were calling them the model minorities because they would come here and they would be successful. They were CEOs and they were business owners and they were thriving. In fact, living in good neighborhoods, going to good schools, going to college, academically being successful. In fact, Asian American income surpassed that of white income. The most highest income in the country were Asian males. So people just were like, they're doing great. So they made them a false conversation of being the model minority. So the hostility stopped because they blended into the American dream, which is a white American dream. They blended into that. Somehow they made their way into that without having to go the direct route, competing with white people. They etched their own niche. The difference is black people never got that opportunity. We were never seen as foreigners. We were seen as, you're here because you work here. You're here because you're our labor source and you're inferior. So you're an inferior labor source. And even if you're not a labor source anymore, you're still inferior. And so therefore you don't deserve what we get simply because of who you are. And that hasn't been something that go on and stop. That's been this way since before this country was even a country. Since 1610, when the first Africans came here into what would become the United States, that's been our story. And if you go back before, when the Africans were coming to the Americas, that's been our story. And it's been a perpetual inferiorization of black people where black lives didn't matter. Continually. And even still, we got free from slavery. We had Jim Crow, we had racism, we got that out the way as much as we could. And then we had drug wars and criminalization and deindustrialization and other racist housing tactics and economic practices and medical things. We got out of that. Now we're facing still police brutalities and police killings and all of this stuff. So it's a continuation thing where other groups might get their moment of discrimination every so often. Black people have gotten this over and over and over and over and over and over again. So when we say Black Lives Matter, it's not saying only Black Lives Matter. It's not denying that all lives matter. It's just saying we want to be part of the All Lives Matter. And it's always funny to me when I hear people use All Lives Matter as a contradictory to Black Lives Matter, as though Black lives aren't included in all lives. And they don't think nothing of that. They use that as a contradiction to Black Lives Matter, as a way to kill Black Lives Matter. They say all lives matter, as though Black lives don't count in the all life situation. So that's what Heavenly was trying to explain to Anila. But Toya blocked it. Toya didn't allow it to happen. Toya somehow, I don't know what Toya was doing, but Toya wasn't listening. She should have been agreeing with Heavenly, at least on that point, because there's always somebody who could educate somebody, but they don't take the opportunity. So anyway, that's pretty much it. It's some very interesting personalities. Like I said, Anila's coming in hard. But she's coming in aggressive and she's getting backlash for it. Her mom is more aggressive than she is. And I don't know if people want to give backlash to her mom, but I'm going to say it. Mama, you're pushy. Slow down. It's annoying. It's annoying. You're an annoying in-law. Seems to be a great person, just an annoying in-law. And so we're seeing so many things that are happening. I'm enjoying the conversation on cultural differences. I'm enjoying seeing, like I've always said, the doctors working, and I'm enjoying seeing the family relationships with parents with their kids and the spouses trying to work on their thing. Marriage to Medicine is a well-packaged show because it gives us a different dynamic to reality. It has its controversy, but it seems like controversy that can actually happen amongst these people who are just friends in an elite circle. I don't even say elite circle, just in upper middle class to upper class, well-to-do black people and people of color. So it's an interesting dynamic. Anyway, that's my take from a life coach's perspective of this week's episode. You guys know I'll be back next week with my next week's episode discussion from a life coach. Continue to heal if you're healing. Continue to find your peace. Let nobody take or rob your peace. It's your peace. So make sure you protect your peace. And as I always say in all my videos, I love you all, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.